What is up, guys? Rick Kakis here, and today I was absolutely blessed by RNG and was lucky enough to get the brand new Pestilence Exotic Machinegun just added into the Division 2 today with the update which added World Tier 5. And so, let's go over this weapon. Now, first and foremost, I know a lot of you guys are going to be curious about how exactly I got this gun. Well, actually, it dropped for 3 out of 4 members of our fire team, and all of us got this weapon the exact same way. We were in the occupied dark zone, which means we were killing the Black Tusk, and we got it from killing specifically Black Tusk bosses. So Black Tusk bosses in the occupied dark zone is how ours specifically dropped for us. Now, does that mean it has to be in the dark zone? It has to be a Black Tusk boss, etc. I'm not exactly sure, but that's how all 3 of us got it. So let's continue on and talk about how this weapon actually performs in game. Is this exotic any good? Is this something you guys should go after and try to get? Well, its perks, or I should say talents, are very, very interesting and actually a little bit complicated. So first off, we have Plague of the Outcasts. After hitting the same enemy 20 times, that enemy is inflicted with Plague of the Outcasts. Whenever an enemy with Plague of the Outcasts is killed, they leave a toxic cloud for 10 seconds that deals 200% weapon damage per second to anyone inside and inflicts them with Pestilence. Now, Pestilence is actually the other perk of this weapon. And it reads, this debuff reduces healing received by 50% for 10 seconds. Whenever an enemy with Pestilence would be downed, they are instead instantly killed. The debuff is removed if the enemy is repaired to full armor. And lastly, we have the holstered perk, Outcast Resilience. While holstered, gain 20% bonus armor for 5 seconds whenever you're affected by blind, bleeding, or burning. So, quite a lot going on with this weapon. Firstly, just for using it, you're going to have a pretty significant increase to your survivability. Whenever you're hit with one of the enemy grenades or grenade launchers that lights you on fire, blinds you, causes you to bleed, which actually happens quite a bit in PvE encounters, you're going to essentially heal yourself for 20% bonus armor. But actually, that increases your resilience even more than that because it's 20% on top of your overall armor. So it's a little bit more than just healing 20% of your existing armor. In any event, it lets you survive scenarios where otherwise you may have died. But the main purpose of this weapon is to be inflicting those toxic clouds, and that is where things get really interesting. Here's exactly how it works. When you're shooting an enemy, as you can see, a little outlaw symbol will appear above that enemy, and as you continue to shoot that enemy, once you get to 20 hits, that symbol will turn red, and that indicates that that enemy is primed essentially, and then whenever that enemy dies with that red outlaw symbol, he will explode into that toxic cloud. And you can see that happening quite a bit in the background gameplay. And it doesn't matter if you kill the enemy with the Pestilence or switch to another gun, or if an ally kills that enemy, as long as you've hit him 20 times, you get that red symbol, it's going to create the cloud. And that cloud is going to damage any enemies within it, but just running through it is still going to give that Pestilence debuff, which is going to lower healing. However, it should be noted that when you do mark an enemy, it doesn't last forever. As you can see here, the red mark simply goes away over time, so you do need to kill the enemy pretty quickly after they are marked to get the cloud. And that all sounds very cool. You have a weapon that can inflict damage over an area of effect, so you can get enemies coming out of doorways, spawn points, just totally lock down areas, right? Well, this weapon does have one massive, colossal downside, and it's the damage. As you can see here, it belongs to the M249 variant of weapon, 550 rounds per minute, 100 rounds in the magazine, but the damage is only 3.8k, and mine rolled with a gear score of 492. The new max with World Tier 5 is 500. Now you can see, compared to another LMG in my inventory, this M60 here, which actually has a lesser gear score of only 480-ish, it does 17.3 thousand damage. That's like more, 4-5 times more. That is such a colossal decrease in damage when you're using the Pestilence. And the reason is, of course, that you need to be landing 20 shots on an enemy to get its perk to activate. But frankly, in my experience using this weapon in the Dark Zone and without the Dark Zone, you're going to see gameplay of both. It's just not worth it. It is just not worth shooting an enemy 20 times, doing almost no damage to that enemy just to get this cloud. Now here's the thing, if you do go to all this work, if you're solo, you're gonna have to shoot an enemy and then switch weapons and then kill that enemy, or just spend all 100 rounds killing a red bar because of that lower damage. But of course, it's much easier to activate with teammates. You can just prime all these enemies and your teammates go after those specifically primed enemies. But still, all that extra work for not that great a payoff. As you can see here, with the Toxic Cloud, when it damages other enemies, it barely does any damage. It is doing like just little tiny ticks of like 7,000 damage per second. And although that's certainly not nothing, and it does seem to get enemies out of cover and react to it, it's not a lot of damage. And frankly, any amazing scenario that you can achieve with this weapon, like for example, priming an enemy as it's coming out of a doorway, killing that enemy, then you get the Toxic Cloud affecting like 4 or 5 red bars as they're pouring out of a spawn point, that's great. But guess what? You can also do that by just throwing a grenade. One incendiary grenade is going to accomplish everything this gun accomplishes pretty much and do way more damage and inflict a status effect which is going to make enemies freeze and not shoot you back. And against other players, I really wouldn't want to use it either. 20 rounds is definitely nothing to scoff at. That's actually going to take you quite a while. 20 rounds out of cover, doing almost no damage. You're probably going to be dead before you can even trigger the priming perk of this weapon if you're fighting another player. But not only that, it's also the fact that these perks don't come up until after you've already killed the enemy. You don't get damage over time on an already alive enemy. I wish you got the Pestilence to activate just automatically after 20 shots, but no, it's not going to help you win that initial gunfight whatsoever. You have to win that gunfight yourself, and then after that guy's dead, maybe you'll have an advantage in anyone else that is going in the exact same location as you killed the first guy. Otherwise, it's pretty useless. And aside from some very specific like trolley type scenarios where you kill an enemy with this exactly at the Dark Zone drop for the helicopter, so the rope comes down and then there's a toxic sludge there, and anyone who goes to put their stuff there, if you're rogue, they won't be able to heal. So yeah, maybe you can construct an incredibly niche scenario in which this is actually good, but unfortunately, the massive lack of damage means that the Pestilence just is not a viable weapon in my opinion, and it's really sad. I hope that Ubisoft goes in here and improves this weapon. All it needs is reasonable damage. Like, all it needs is to have the same-ish damage as you would find on a normal M249, and then we've actually got a really good gun to talk about, because the 200% weapon damage, obviously 200% of something that does 1/5 of what a comparable gun does, it's not good enough. It's still under damaging. But if this did normal weapon damage, then 200% of that is actually nothing to scoff at. So if this ever receives a buff, I think it could be a very good weapon, especially for killing enemies in spawn points, locking down areas, etc. But until then, just not worth using, unfortunately. At least not for the purpose of killing enemies with this weapon. However, there is a question of, is it worth utilizing this exotic just for the holstered perk? So you get to use a totally different weapon, an assault rifle, an actually good LMG, anything you want that can actually output significantly more damage, but you also get that 20% increased armor whenever you're status affected. So for that, I would say, well, actually, it's more viable than you may think. If you are a PvE focused player, it seems like the ads in this game want nothing more than to inflict you with a status effect, and gaining 20% bonus armor anytime that happens. I mean, when do you need bonus armor? You need it when you're on fire, you're losing health, you need to change cover. That's the most important time to get that bonus so that you can make it to cover. There's a lot of scenarios in which I've died where if I would have had that bonus, I would have survived. So if you're making a tank build, or you find your survivability is lacking, putting on this gun just for that holstered bonus is actually something pretty viable and wouldn't be that bad of a thing. The only concern I would have in doing that is a lack of ammunition. Obviously, you're relying on one weapon, your assault rifle, to output like all the damage because this weapon really lacks in damage, and therefore you're chewing through all your assault rifle ammunition, and you could get to the point where the only thing you have ammo for is this thing, and this thing can barely kill a red bar. So that's the bad scenario. But again, if you are finding yourself totally fine on ammo and you just want the survivability, put this thing on. Because that holstered perk is actually its strongest feature right now. And so, there's my overview of this brand new exotic weapon. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, found it informative, and if you did, please remember to help me out by simply rating and especially sharing this video. Now, if you guys want to see more Division 2 content similar to this, don't be afraid to slap that subscribe button. Now, if you guys want to get in touch with me and keep up to date with the latest channel activity, the best way is to follow me on Twitter at RickCacus. That's linked in the description down below. Again, I hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, have a good day.